Season's greetings and welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. On today's show, we'll explore the world of something called value graphics. Leading our way with a keynote of the same is David Allison, a human values expert, global researcher, and best-selling author. David is also the founder of the Valuegraphics Project, where his research and work has helped make values a measurable business metric. What is the secret to building a values-based business? How can you use values to create systems to run your company? Find out as we get ready to melt with David Allison.
I'm really excited to be here talking to everybody today, and I want to talk about how we can all survive and thrive as insights, consumer behavior insights, how that stuff is changing and shifting all around us. So my presentation today is called Surviving the Evolution of Insights, and it's very much about the science of values and influencing people, because after all, that's what we're all here to do, is try and influence some folks, get some people to make a decision that we'd like them to make. So the best way to think about this, the best way I've come up with anyway, is to think about it as a sort of two-factor equation that we have to solve for. First thing we need to think about, first factor in that equation, is just the wonky tools that we've been using so far. You look at demographics as one of the two tools I'm going to talk about here. They're incredibly inaccurate. Well, for two reasons. Here's how I know this. 750,000 surveys we've done around the world, long form qual-quant surveys where we've talked to people about 436 different metrics. What makes them who they are? What are their wants, their needs, their values, their expectations from their life? These are really incredibly in-depth profiles of human beings from 180 countries. It's more accurate than you need for a PhD from Harvard. And one of the things we found is this. If you look at people inside any demographic bucket, any cohort of people, all of the demographics we're all familiar with, age, gender, marital status, income, number of kids, all of that stuff, and say how frequently are these people within that demographic cohort? How similar are they to each other? The answer is shocking. They're only 10.5% similar, which means they're only 10.5% targetable. Let's round it off and call it 10%. That means 90% of what we do is wasted. 90 cents on the dollar is not going to land. The best you can hope for is a 10% ROI when you're using demographics to understand people, which kind of explains why when we send out a direct response email or a letter, if we're still using letters these days, and we get a 2 or 3% response rate, we're over the moon excited as marketers, because that's amazing. But really, when you think about it, that's like a 97% fail on whatever it is we just did. And the reason is we're using these inaccurate demographics to send that out and try and get people to do something that we'd like them to do. Let's talk about psychographics. If you look up the definition of psychographics, if you do a little Google search, you'll find like 4 million different responses, and some of them are like 4 pages long. I've read a whole lot of them. My favorite definition for psychographics is just everything that's already happened. So that includes things like click studies and behavioral mapping and geo-targeting and shopping cart analysis. Just questions that you ask from your CRM system, everything except demographics that tracks what people have already felt or said or what their emotions are or their preferences, all of that kind of stuff. And the problem with that is psychographic data, it's over. As soon as you write it down, it's historical data. If you know it and you can write it down on a piece of paper, it's already happened. It's historical. So it's not going to help us figure out how we can get people to do what we'd like them to do next, how we can be predictive, how we can understand what it's going to take to get someone to say yes. Instead, what it's doing is showing us some patterns in the noise, which is super useful. Some of the times we're just looking to replicate those patterns. But generally speaking, what we want to do is change a behavior. To change a behavior, psychographics aren't going to help us. Inaccurate demographics, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. I'm not going to be 18 to 24 years old anymore. I'm going to be 25 to 36 years old. I'm going to be 37 to 45 years old. I'm going to go from being an entry-level employee to a mid-management employee. I can go on and on and on. They're kind of wonky, these tools. They're not incredibly accurate, and they're a little bit unstable. And despite that, we've done okay. Things have been fine. However, things are changing. We all know about GDPR and some of the other issues that are coming up around data availability. That stuff's not going to go away. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get more and more difficult to find the data and the insights that we need. So it's pretty clear. We need to find a new path. We need to find a new way forward. I'm going to tell you a little story about three friends in an alley at midnight. So three friends are out having a few drinks. They haven't seen each other for a long time. It's, just after COVID, they've been pandemic, isolation, lockdown. And so they're finally getting to go to their favorite watering hole after all this time and sit and talk to each other and get to just catch up on everything that's been going on in their lives. So they've been having a few drinks. They've had a few drinks too many. And one of the smart ones, puts their hand up and says, you know what, we need to go. We need to get out of here. So they put their coats on and they start walking down the street, and their voices are getting louder and they're being more raucous and they're punching each other on the shoulder. And then suddenly they turn a corner and there's a dark alley, and they have to decide, what are we going to do? Now, friend number one, the only thing we know for certain is friend number one's primary value in life is experiences, and wants to go down that dark alley. This has been put here just for us, guys. We're a little bit drunk. I love you guys. Let's go down the dark alley. It's going to be a lot of fun. What a perfect way to end the evening. And friend number two, the only thing we know for certain is their primary value in life is security. They go, why would we go down that dark alley? What a ridiculous idea. Who knows what might happen? Who knows what's waiting for us at the other end of that dark alley? Let's go back to the bar. We'll turn on the lights. Might even need to call the police. And friend number three, the only thing we know for certain is friend number three's primary value in life is friendship. I don't care whether we go down the dark alley or we go back to the bar. I don't care what we do, as long as we stick together, because that's what's most important. We're a little bit drunk. I love you guys. So there we have three different people faced with the same set of inputs, the same circumstances, and they have to make a decision. And we didn't need to understand what their demographics are in order to see how they're going to behave. The only thing we needed to understand is, what are their values? How do they make their decisions? What's their filtering mechanism, their internal GPS that helps them navigate through the decisions they have to make in the course of their life? They didn't check in on their demographics either. Not only did we not need to know them, but neither did they. They didn't stop and say, well, gee, I'm an 18 to 24-year-old male and I make $50,000 a year and I have a white-collar job. I'm single, but I want to get married. And therefore, I'm going to decide this way. In fact, customers, consumers, humans, people, we don't care about our demographics. Only marketers do. So that's a realization that we have to come to here. What we value, in fact, drives everything we do. All of our decisions, emotions, behaviors, everything that makes us who we are and who we will become are rooted in our values. Now, let me tell you a quick example. If we talk about neurology as just one field of behavioral science, we could talk about this in terms of psychology, psychiatry, sociology. They all agree on this, but I'll just tell you about neurologists. Neurologists will tell you that there's a part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, and it's basically your CEO. And your prefrontal cortex decides everything for you, how you're going to behave, how you're going to feel, what you're going to do as you walk through your life. So it takes all the incoming data and looks at it and says, all right, we're going to go in that direction. We're going to chase that thing, or we're going to run away. We're going to feel happy. We're going to feel sad. So your prefrontal cortex only uses one set of filters to make all of these decisions on your behalf, and that's your values. If family is an important value to you, you will run towards that thing because your prefrontal cortex makes you. You don't have a choice in the matter. This is just what being human is. You will go towards anything that gives you more of what you value and run away from anything that doesn't. Now, the other beautiful thing about values as a new kind of consumer insight is that they're forever. They're not unstable. They're not inaccurate. They're never going to change. We're not an octopus. You don't get to chop off an arm. You don't get to chop off a value and grow a new one later on in life. Once your values are set in your late childhood and early adolescence, they're yours for the rest of your life. It's very useful information about your consumers to know that this unchanging driving force behind how they're going to make a decision, if indeed we're all here just trying to get some people to make a decision that we'd like them to make. Now, here's something else to consider. At this moment in time, we are doubling down on our values all around the world. If you look at all the things that are going on under social change, that big broad heading, things like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, things like ESG, things like Black Lives Matter, All of these kinds of issues are driven by people's values. You look at the political divides that are going on in many countries around the world, maybe most markedly in the United States of America. We have people on either side of these political divisions who are driven entirely to do what they're doing based on a set of values. You think about the future of work, the conversations we're having about working from home or hybrid working or going back to work, about engaged workplace culture. All of these conversations are driven by what people value. Even the future of leadership, about empathetic leadership and servant leadership and all of the different issues that are necessary, the soft skills that are necessary to be a successful leader today are about honoring the values of your employees. And then in the field of consumer behavior, of course, as marketers, perhaps where we're most interested in thinking about how this plays out, we can give you examples like 2 words. I can explain everything that's going on around values driving consumer behavior right now. One is Twitter. Look at the complete meltdown happening in that around that brand right now because values are not being honored in the way that they should. Values are not being respected. And then the opposite side of that equation is Patagonia. Always been a values-driven brand, but suddenly along comes the founder and does the biggest values-driven mic drop in the history of values-driven initiatives and gives his company away to the planet. The people who are values aligned with that brand will now never shop anywhere else. None of those customers will ever go and shop at another brand that provides the same kinds of things that Patagonia provides. Values are driving every conversation around us. And in fact, I believe we've entered an entirely new economic era. We've left the sharing economy, the experience economy, the gig economy, all that stuff. We've left it behind. And today we live in the values economy. You know, values aren't just in the news. Values are the news today. And so as marketers, we have to realize this. Values are now the most powerful force on earth. They're driving what everybody does. Here's the problem. There hasn't been an accurate way to measure values, particularly for large groups of people. Psychologists have been able to do this for a long time, and counselors who give you an MMPI inventory and a Myers-Briggs test, but be able to say that the entire target audience for a group of people, for some brand, this whole group of people, these are their shared values, so we understand how as a group they're going to make a decision. That's just not been possible. And as Peter Drucker famously said, you can't manage what you can't measure. So clearly, figuring out some kind of a management or a measuring system is necessary. So that's what we did. My company, we launched the Valuegraphics Project and we built the Valuegraphics database. We've turned values into data. And I'm going to show you how you can use that as marketers to help create the connections, the motivation, and the influence that you want to have. While we were doing this, now we went out and did those 750,000 surveys and we talked to people in 180 countries and 152 languages and created this database that's more accurate than you need for a PhD from Harvard. We proved 3 monumental truths, things that I think 2 of them, at least, we've always kind of suspected, but now we have the data to measure it, map it, and back these things up. First off, there's only 56 values, which I found very shocking. I thought there'd be a lot more. Only 56 things drive the sum total of human behavior on this entire planet across 180 countries. I think that's a very hopeful number to think about right now in this moment in history where there's so many forces who are trying to drive us apart and convince us that us versus them is the construct we need to be using, this binary way of looking at people. And in fact, there's only 56 things that make us different. It's not very many. There's 88 keys on a piano keyboard. It's more complicated to learn how to play Happy Birthday on the piano than it is to understand all the various keys you need to play and to understand the sum total of human behaviors and emotions on this planet for everybody right now moving forward. Second big thing that we discovered is this, that people with the same demographics, they're not the same. I'm not my demographics and you are not your demographics. And we talked about this earlier on a few moments ago, that people within any demographic cohort are only on average similar about 10.5% of the time. They're 90% dissimilar from each other. And now we have the data to be able to say that, but we've always kind of known it, right? You can't say to yourself that you honestly believe that all baby boomers are the same, or that all Gen X is the same, or all Gen Z are the same. All those surveys out there that are telling you what millennials want, or here's what Gen Z is going to do next, you got to look at that with a really healthy dose of skepticism now that we have this data that backs up how inaccurate it is to try and profile entire swaths of the human population based on something as silly as how old they are, or what gender they are, or whether they earn $100,000 a year or $50,000 a year. It has nothing to do with how they're going to decide what dark alley at midnight they want to walk down. And the third thing we discovered is this: people with the same values, unlike demographics, people with the same values are remarkably the same. If we put people into groups based on common shared values across all 436 of those other metrics that we measured, their wants, their needs, their expectations, they coalesce and become so similar. They're like tribes of people, schools of fish, if you will, that are all going to move in the same direction. And we won't even understand what's going on because we can't see their values. And that's maybe one of the key differences and the reason why it's taken so long for people to grasp this concept, because demographics we can see for the large part. We can tell whether someone's a man or a woman. We can tell whether someone's young or old. That goes back to heuristics from ancient times. We've always looked at people and made snap judgments about who they are. But the thing about values, you can't see them. It's on the inside. This is about talking to people based on what's in their hearts and what makes them who they are and how they live their lives. With valuegraphic data, we're suddenly able to understand that. Instead of looking at people on the outside, we can look at them on the inside where it matters. And the beautiful thing that comes out of this, now that we have this database, now that we have this ability, is instead of this divisiveness that demographics leads to, this binary view of everything that we look at, it's about rich versus poor and young versus old and gay versus straight and black versus white. Now we have a set of metrics that unite us, that bring us together around the things that are deep inside our hearts that make us human. And if nothing else ever happened ever again after all the research we've done, if we just knew this and could drive the planet in this direction, I'd be a very happy guy. Okay, you might be asking yourself by this point, how can I figure out the values of the people that I want to reach? So I'm going to share with you 3 questions that we've developed over the course of time. These 3 questions are going to, you just ask them in as many times as you can to as many people as you can and start to listen to the answers. The answers are the themes that will bubble to the surface as you're listening to all the ways people answer these questions. That's their values coming to the surface. And then all you need to do is steer towards those values, like in the examples we just went through. So the first question, why do you go to work? Not where do you go to work, but why. People will talk to you about their family or about how it's a creative outlet for them. All kinds of answers will come to the surface. The second question, why would you give away half of your lottery winnings? Not who would you give it to, but why would you give it away? And lastly, what would you say to your 10 years ago self and why? That's my favorite one. It really gets some interesting answers if you ask your friends over a glass of wine around the dinner table one night. What would you say to your 10 years ago self? And more importantly than what? Why would you say those things? Lastly, I want to just wrap up with a thought here. Using values as a way to understand people, motivate them, engage them, connect with them, all the things we're trying to do as marketers. It's 8 times more impactful, 8 times more effective, 8 times more efficient than using demographics and psychographics like we've always done. But it's far bigger than that. It's a far more important thing for us all to embrace and start to do. Because the longer we continue to insist on using demographic ideas to look at people, the longer we sit in our boardrooms around the world and say, you know what, we've got a group of people here we need to understand. Let's look at them based on age. Let's look at them based on gender. Let's look at them based on the color of their skin or the people that they love. What we're doing is normalizing these ideas that this is how we should look at each other. And normalizing those ideas leads us to stereotypes. It inevitably does. If we say, okay, we're going to look at people based on whether they're male or female, why are we doing that? Because we believe there's some inherent traits that women all share, and that there's some inherent traits that men all share. And the data shows us now that that's just not true. Values are not aligned with any particular demographic category. So it's false. And furthermore, it's normalizing these stereotypes that lead to the normalization of things like ageism, sexism, racism, homophobia. These are big social problems that we're grappling with every single day. But there's really good news here. Very good news. It's so simple to fix this. If we just change the way we look at people, that's all. That's all we got to do. Change the way we look at ourselves, change the way we look at each other, change the way we think about and look at our target audiences, the employees inside our organizations. If we just change the way we look at people, we will benefit. It'll be good for us. Our work will benefit. It's going to be great for the companies that we work for. And you know what? The world will benefit too. It's not going to happen quick. It's going to be slow and incremental. But if we can start looking at what makes humans human, if we can start thinking about each other based on what's inside our hearts, we're going to end up with a much, much better world.
That's a wrap on this episode. You can follow Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. If you'd like to follow me, I'm @Suvenk on Twitter. Once again, season's greetings and thanks for watching.